The hours you put in for better or for worse. That's the quote of the episode. That was really good. Um, yeah, thanks
It's
for
the
that.
working world, yeah.
Hey everyone, welcome and or welcome back to the KidStudio podcast. Here we talk about career planning opportunities for K-12 students post-graduation. As always, my name is Aaron, and today we have Emma with us.
Thanks, Aaron. It's great to be here. My name is Emma Mills, and I live in Chicago, Illinois. I've lived there for a really long time, Midwestern, born and raised. And I work for an organization called Digital Promise, and I'm a senior communications manager there, and I support communications for a variety of programs that we run. So I'm happy to be here.
Nice, thanks for that. All right, so we're gonna go and kick off this episode with a quick little game. So I call it one for one. Essentially, I'll say one word, and then I'd like you to reply with the first one that comes to mind. So I have a total of 3 words. The first one is student.
Creative.
Second one is career.
Scary.
Good. And then the last one is success.
Subjective.
I like that. It's really good. So I like subjective actually a lot with success, but I want to pick your brain a little bit on career. So what did you mean when you said scary?
I think I was just reflecting back on how I felt when I was younger and even how I feel sometimes today, because career is such a big, lofty topic, and talked about it a lot when I was in high school, because it's so much of a focus of what are you going to do when you graduate high school? You're going to go to college. What career do you want to do post-college, or what career do you want to do right out of high school? And I never really had a great answer for that in high school or in college. So I often associate fear and some anxiety with the thought of a career, even though I'm 8 years into my own career post-college, still figuring it out. So it can feel scary sometimes still.
This is very important. So this is why this KidStudio program is so important to me, because I want to make sure that middle and high school students, even elementary in some cases, they have a platform where they can express themselves and figure out what it is they want to do when they graduate. So when it comes to the word used for success, explain what you meant by that just a little bit deeper.
Success is thought about in a really linear way. You know, first you do this, and then you do this and do that, and that's the only way to achieve a meaningful career and a meaningful life. And I've learned a lot over the past 10 years about how I categorize success, and how I talk about it now is a lot different than how I did even 5 years ago. You know, 5 years ago, I pictured myself maybe running a company someday. And I'm not saying no to that necessarily, but my goals are a lot different now for my career. And that's honestly based a lot in thinking about what I want my life to look like holistically. One path I could take is, you know, climbing the corporate ladder or the nonprofit ladder, because that's the industry that I'm in, or I could invest more holistically in other areas of my life, and that could look successful to me. And that's kind of how I see success now. So, it's a reminder. Subjective is a reminder to myself that it's okay to change my mind about what success looks like, depending on what season of life I'm in. And that's something I kind of wish I could go back and tell my high school self, is that take a couple breaths. It's going to be okay. You're going to change your mind, but you'll land where you should.
That was really good.
Yeah, definitely.
The main question for the podcast is, what do you believe public schools need in order for students to be more exposed to career opportunities?
Doing a lot of community partnerships with local employers and companies to bring that kind of work and exposure to work into schools, so that students from a really early age, even elementary school, can see, okay, what does it actually look like to work at the local Toyota factory? Like, maybe you have an uncle who works there, but what does that mean day to day? So actually going in and shadowing, or having employees come in and talking about that.
Right.
So that's something that I think we're seeing more within schools across the country, that those community partnerships and employer partnerships are really growing and expanding to show students what work exists out there. I will also say, just a caveat to that is, depending on what a school district or a school looks like, whether it's a rural community or more urban or et cetera, like, exposure to different jobs is going to look a lot different, because I think when you're young, even thinking back to myself in high school, I only knew the jobs that I knew or that people in my life had.
Mhm.
And either I didn't really understand what that meant or entailed, so it felt very nebulous to me, or it really limited my scope of possibilities that existed for a career. Because I'm like, okay, I know about these 5 to 7 jobs that exist. Maybe I'll do one of those things. So, for example, I knew a lot of teachers in my life. And so for a while, I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll be a teacher. And I realized that that probably wasn't for me. And I didn't actually study that in college. But because I knew so many teachers in my life, I kind of had limited my path,
Mhm.
even just mentally, for a lot of years in high school. So all of that is to say, sort of to what I had shared previously about having strong community partnerships and bringing local employers in, or bringing students to local employers. Sort of coupled with that, I think it would be important to leverage the power of technology to expose students to jobs that don't exist maybe in their community, but they can access either via remote work, given how much that's expanding just across
Mhm.
industries and sectors, or also just jobs that exist in other communities if they want to try something new or go somewhere else. So sort of striking that balance between what can you do at home, what's available in your community, but also let's talk about what careers and sectors and jobs exist that students might not even know are possible.
Mhm. No, I really like that. So I talked about this a while ago as well. So essentially, field trips is what I'm hearing. We really need students to leave the classroom and visit these facilities, whatever they may be. I know that a school district that I talked to, actually, I'm in North Carolina. Um, a few hours out in Cary, North Carolina, I know that Wake County schools they have a program where professionals come into the classroom and they talk to the students. And I like this a lot because, of course, it lets those students know, oh, wow, this is a career, I can do this. But it's one thing to hear about it in a book, and it's another to actually see a professional in class. So, for example, like trade schools, as I mentioned earlier, you have professionals coming in, whether it's HVAC or plumbing, if they're actually in the classroom and telling them, hey, this is what I did, this is what I'm doing right now. And I want them to, I haven't actually been in the classroom with them, but if I were there, I'd like to think, I don't want to say they sugarcoat what they tell the students, but I'd like for it to be very transparent. I want them to be honest, like, hey guys, this is a great field to be in, but here are the cons to where it's at. I'm actually trying to develop my own business and actually transition into something else. I wish they would do that, because when a lot of people, quote unquote, preach about the pros and no cons about a profession, students start believing that subjectivity, as you mentioned earlier, or that traditional mindset, like, oh, for example, a lawyer or a doctor, it's so great, makes all this money, but they may not realize the hours they have to put in. They may not have time to spend time with family on holidays. It's small things that we should really be thinking about. And it sounds fickle and minuscule, but it really is important when you think about the bigger picture. So that's just one thing that came to mind with field trips, and then having professionals talk in the classroom. I want them to be more transparent with the students. But yeah, that's all I had. Did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I love that. I think you mentioned this too when I was reflecting about the subjectivity of success. Having transparent input from people about their jobs or industries and careers, that's valuable to me as a 30-year-old. Like if I'm thinking about, applying to a job, or before I got the one that I'm in now, I talked to people and I really relied on them being transparent with me to help shape where I wanted to go next.
Mhm.
So I really like the idea of instilling that questioning and desire for transparency within students when they're younger, when they're in school, as a normal and respectful part of the process of figuring out what you want to do. I think, too, something that I really admire about young people that I interact with is that they ask really honest questions. And like, if you're talking to a sixth grader, they're going to be honest with you and they're going to ask honest questions.
Mhm.
And somewhere along the way, I think as adults, we can lose a little bit of that desire, or like bend toward transparency, especially when talking about a job, because you want to seem professional and all that stuff. And so I love the idea of instilling transparency as a normal and valued part of the process of figuring out what you want to do in your career.
Mhm.
And then really briefly, this is a bit of an aside, but it came to mind when you were talking. Something that I've also noticed and really admired in a lot of schools and school districts around the country is a focus on student social emotional learning and well-being. And a lot of that has come out because of or not, been born because of the pandemic, but really the need for it has been emphasized because so many students were learning remotely and going through trauma as young people from 2020 to today because of pandemic related things. And so a lot of schools and districts are focusing on instilling those skills on par with academics for students. So they're not just learning subject material or a competency, they're learning from an academic perspective, they're learning subject material and competencies from a social, emotional, and well-being perspective. So I'm just going to be really curious to see how that sort of impacts the future and shapes the future workforce, because if a student from the time they're in third grade is really learning about and thinking critically about their emotions and how to build relationships in a healthy way and all the things that are incorporated with social emotional learning and well-being, what are all the powerful, really cool ways that that's going to impact our workforce, and how is that going to be seen as a value? Because we already know that employers are looking for people who can work with people from different backgrounds and build really strong relationships and communicate really well. So I think that connection and value of SEL and well-being with the future workforce will be really interesting. And that's something I would encourage students today to just really own and be proud of the skills that they're learning in those areas too.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think so. This will really, I feel like, enhance business development or entrepreneurs, just because it's one thing to have that traditional way of learning, like you said, academically. You're learning about your academics. You're using academics to get a college education and then a career. But if you're focusing more on the SEL, as you mentioned, they're going to start looking at things differently than what we did when we were in school. And I think that's really going to drive business development, because they'll realize, oh, academically speaking, this company is flourishing, doing very well, but it's doing very poorly in this area, and it's related to SEL. A lot of high turnover rates or whatever it may be. So if they find ways to fix or close those gaps, I think it's really going to help that business as a whole. So I think with SEL, this is just like an educated guess, but I think with SEL rising, I believe it's going to also enhance business development with more innovative leaders. That's why I personally think I could be off. We'll see in a couple of years, though.
I hope so. That would be great.
Yeah, I hope so too. But that's all I had today for you, Emma. So thank you so much for your insight. It was very refreshing. I'm glad when I have these episodes with people of different backgrounds, but it's really good to hear similar answers, but they're very different at the same time. Like, it may come from somewhere different, but it always piles into the same bowl, if that makes sense. It doesn't sound too far-fetched. Think of like salad. It's one bowl, right? But you have so many different ingredients. So it's always exciting just hearing everyone's perspective. So I really do appreciate the wisdom you've given us today. So to close out, do you have any words of encouragement? So usually I ask this question for the listeners. There may be other entrepreneurs, other professionals, but it's really geared towards the parents and students. So do you have any words of encouragement for them?
The point that you made earlier that really is sticking with me, that your passions can be practical and they can translate into a future career and what you want to do. Because the reality is, by the time you're 18 or 22 or whatever it is that you enter the full-time workforce, that's going to be the majority of your life. That's going to be most of the hours that you spend, for better or worse. So making sure that you really enjoy or find some sort of value in what you're doing is so important. So taking time to really hone that when you're young and still thinking about what you want to do is great. And it doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to have it all flushed out. Like I said earlier, your definition for success will change, but really lean into what makes you uniquely you and own it.
That was really good. The hours you put in, for better or for worse, that's the quote of the episode. That was really good. Yeah, thanks for that.
The working world, yeah.
That's really good. I think when students hear that, it'll really put it in perspective, or hopefully it will, like, okay, this is a really good career, but dang, is this really what I want to be doing? And if I weigh the cons of this one, it may not be as good as I thought it was. So that's definitely one of the quote book. That was really good. All right, so we'll end it right here for today. Thanks for going it with me.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron.
Thank you.